What's up, everybody? Jared here, and I've got a very prestigious gentleman across from me. Well, I guess all the way in Mexico. I've got Diego Ruzzarin with me. What's up, Diego?
All good, man. Enjoying the tarnished life, having so much fun. I was looking forward for this conversation, dude.
Yeah, dude, me too. Speaking of the tarnished life, we're all playing Elden Ring. I'm playing it. Diego's playing it. Mateus, Diego's brother's playing it. Mateus and I are actually both playing on my Twitch channel. You can check that out. Hopefully the link's in the description. If not, I'm sure Julio will pin a comment with my Twitch channel. But anyway, today we're here to talk about the Batman, the Matt Reeves movie. Specifically, we're going to be talking about political philosophy and Batman. But first, I already uploaded a video on this channel saying what my take was and if I generally liked the movie. First, I want to hear from Diego. Diego, what did you generally think of the movie? Did you enjoy it?
No, man, I did not enjoy it.
Okay.
I have to be completely honest with you. That's why I
Please
think
do.
it's going to be such a good conversation. I don't know what happened to me. I have this growing sense of insatisfaction with Hollywood lately and movie production as a whole thing, right? Because movie seems to be moving in a direction of self-referentiality. So everything is about cameos within cameos and signifiers within signifiers, and like mixing universes and just giving you this sense of pleasure out of referencing to something that you already understand, so you can relate to the movie and have this sense of nostalgia of knowing and understanding and remembering. But there's nothing new. There's absolutely nothing new anywhere. There's no new ideas presented. For me, it was I read the movie as an attempt to do a detective movie from the 60s, but contextualized in 2022, which makes no fucking sense. Some parts of the movie, you see them and they felt like way too slow for the actual pace of things in the digital era that we're living, and at the same times with explosions of hyper technology, which seem very modern. And I don't know, like the whole thing felt like a Frankenstein. Some good ideas. I really did not enjoy the tone of the movie. The pacing of the movie for me was terrible. I felt like some scenes drag out for way too long. I have some issues with the casting as well. I really don't understand some of the casting choices for the movie, and overall, it's strange, DC means detective comics, and in a way, to be a good detective is at the core of the character of Batman. But then again, we have seen the Batman evolve in so many directions, and what we have seen from the Batman in the past 10 years is so different from this that trying to move back, it feels like a Hail Mary nostalgic move. That's what I felt like. I really felt it was a Frankenstein of intentions that led nowhere and offer nothing really new to the formula.
It's interesting. Maybe I'm suffering from a little bit of like the battered moviegoer syndrome, because I very much agree with the notion of what you said, that movies, especially Hollywood movies, are constantly obsessed with doing references and winking at the audience and, trying to capitalize on whether it be nostalgia or something like that. And where the whole battered movie audience thing comes in is that, like, this as well as Spider-Man, I watched these movies and I was so happy that there wasn't more of that, because I'm still stuck in like the Joss Whedon era where
Yeah.
everything was super self-aware, where everything was, some sort of reference to something either culturally or even just poking fun at the fact that, oh my God, can you believe we're actually asking you to suspend disbelief? It's a movie. How ridiculous of a request is that?
Yeah.
Which is something that I can't stand. So I'm curious, what were some of the things that you felt were like a little bit too referential? And in terms of like the shared universe, they only recently announced that like the Penguin's going to have his own show, which I'm actually excited for because I really like Colin Farrell and I thought he totally killed it in the role.
Yeah, I know he did a good job. But for example, there's a scene where Gordon is trying to push the Penguin to confess to something, and he's showing this picture of the past victim of the Riddler. And that scene specifically, like look at this, look at his face, like it was eaten by rats, right? And then the Penguin is like, oh my God, man, why do you show me that? It's like, the Penguin will do that? It made me completely feel at the movies, and it's weird when you break out of the fantasy, because in a way, of course, when you're watching a movie, you're like being deceived into this universe, but you like being deceived. It's a nice lie. It's a lie that you buy yourself into, and you just like you get into the pace, you immerse yourself into the experience. But I felt at so many points of the movie that I was like pulled out, and I felt like this huge disconnection that I felt I was in the movies. Like I felt I was being lied to, like in this very vulgar way. And that scene specifically where Detective Gordon is like, look at him, look at the picture, like he's gross, and the penguin's like, oh my god, man, don't show me that. It felt like cliche to the point of ridiculousness. Like the penguin is being threatened into something that is supposed to be gross because a guy's face was eaten by rats. Like, really, the penguin will be grossed out by that? It's like I can never imagine in a world where that would be real. And then I think like this attitude from the Batten of being this like rebellious little child that he doesn't like his money, and he's like not at ease with his position of power, and he's no longer the playboy billionaire. He like, because in the end, this notion between the duality of the Batman of being the Cape Crusader, which is beating people to a pulp in order to pursue his twisted version of morality, and then on the other side pretending to be the playboy in order to hide his other persona, his more fucked up real persona. And then in this movie it doesn't really work because none of them are really functional. Like I cannot imagine a world where a character like Bruce Wayne will be so dysfunctional and at the same time invisible, because he arrives at places, at public places, and people don't really pay attention to him. Like, he can be alone in a public spot, and that would be insane for somebody to have that amount of money, that amount of power, and to be left alone. I don't know. Like, I felt that
there's that part in the movie where like some random cop is like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Wayne."
Yeah,
but I hear what you're saying. I mean, one of the things I don't know. One of the things I want to talk about is just like, what do we think that, despite if the movie worked for you, it worked for me. I'm very grateful that it worked for me, because anytime I can go to the movies lately and something works for me, I'm like, oh, thank God. I love the very few opportunities that I get to really like enjoy something with, the general critical consensus. I think the tone work. I think a lot of what you're saying in terms of like kind of like nerfing the technology is kind of based on the fact that the movie really is basically Zodiac plus 7, and then Zodiac is very much in the 60s and stuff like that, and there are entire shots pulled from it, entire shots pulled from 7. But I think one of the things that I think would be particularly appropriate for you, given the topics that you discuss on your channel and given your educational background, or maybe even autodidactic background, whatever, is I think what this movie attempts to do politically, especially when you compare it to something like The Dark Knight, which is something that I kind of tried to do in my previous video, and I think you might have some insights on that. But the way that I look at it, and what I think is kind of an interesting distinction, is that especially if you look at the first 2 Nolan movies, there's this sense that the institutions are corrupt, and there's really nothing you can do about it on a policy level to fix it. It's not even something that's brought up. Our best hope, ultimately, the trilogy concludes, is symbols. Courageous individuals, whether it be Harvey Dent or Batman or Robin, that give people faith in good and hope that can then empower these individuals. And my interpretation of the Batman is that what Bruce Wayne ultimately learns, mostly through Catwoman and then his conversation with the Riddler at the end, is that no, people do bad things because of institutional corruption and institutional impotence. So like, if the Gotham Renewal Project wasn't corrupt, and then people like Catwoman's friend Anna, she wouldn't have to be forced to work with thugs to make ends meet, and the Riddler wouldn't have to become the Riddler because his experience as an orphan wouldn't be as riddled, pun not intended, with disturbing shit like drugs, abuse, death, etc. What do you think about that? Did you get a similar reading from it?
Yeah, very similar. In that sense, I got a very, very similar reading. One question I want to ask you before I go into my rant. So do you think this movie can coexist in the universe as The Last Joker?
I don't know if it actually tries to. If it wanted to, well, first of all, I mean, from a very basic, uninteresting answer, the answer is no, because they introduced a different Joker at the end in Arkham Asylum. But I think that in terms of the way that it seems to be preoccupied with using the Batman universe to talk about wealth inequality, really that one's more about wealth inequality than necessarily institutional corruption. And like the beacon of hope at the end of this movie is the new mayor saying we need to reinvigorate faith in our institutions and stuff like that. So I think they could do it. I don't think they will. But it is interesting how the kind of more successful DC movies and the more adult-oriented DC movies find it necessary to take a very strong political stance and make kind of the corruption and the degradation of Gotham that is so essential to the way that it's written in the comics, that they necessarily make it kind of a mirror of some of the left-wing criticisms of cities and late stage capitalism today.
Well, the only thing I will change out of your argument will be it's not left wing, it's liberal, and this changes pretty much everything that you can analyze about the movie. Once you change the analysis from leftist to liberal, then it starts making more sense. Let me break down the argument. Why? Because in a way, the argument of this last Batman movie is that in the end, the power of money corrupts even the most well-established institutions. If it's the right amount of money, if it's an absurd, massive, perverse amount of money, it will end up subversing the power of institutions. The amount of money under the renewal project ended up corrupting little by little the weak spots, the crackling in the armors, and ended up corrupting the whole institutions. And I think the trust in institutionalism is still very much liberal, in the sense of democratic liberalism, social democratic institutions, which the more we understand them, especially in late capitalism, the more we have to detach this thought from true leftism, in the sense that I think more and more we see that the necessary for a radical leftist mindset, much more in the Marxist sense, where only a true revolution can bring any significant change. Because whatever you do within the social democratic institutions is still fragile and pervertible by the right amount of money. And I think this is for me the impossibility of this latest Batman movie. What it shows is that in the end, for me, what is at risk in this fight between left and right, but in the American way, liberal and conservative, is that from a postmodern point of view, conservatives think that meaning used to exist and we have to fight back to get it, right? So conservatives are like nostalgic for meaning. There was meaning in the world, we lost it, either in religion, in tradition, or in culture. We have to get it back. So that's why the project is called renewal. So we have to renew our belief in institutions, in traditions, in culture, in religion, in morality. So we have to find back meaning because we lost it at some point. Okay. Revolutionaries and progressives, they think meaning hasn't existed yet, but it will exist under the right conditions. So they are fighting for a future where they think meaning will emerge. So progressives are constantly pushing the boundaries to include minorities, to find liberties, to reorganize societies in ways that they believe that the meaning will emerge. Okay, I think the true philosophical position today is to say that both are wrong. That meaning has never existed, meaning will never exist, meaning is something we create. Meaning is something that we attribute almost arbitrarily to the relationship between concepts to which we observe the world, right? So I think both of them are equally naive, in the sense that both politicians portrayed in the Batman movie, one of them is fighting for the renewal project, so is the traditional corrupted institutions corrupted by dirty money, and the other one is naive in the sense that she says, your family used to be very philanthropic. I want you to get back into the game of philanthropy. So what is she really proposing? Like, what is this progressiveness that we can expect out of the new politician that is saying that we have to reestablish hope in institutions? If we know that in the end it's not about individual effort, and all these individual characters, the little policeman, the gangster, the mobster, the corporate guy, the CEO, all of them are susceptible to being manipulated by the right amount of money. So in the end, you need a monstrous amount of money to fix the city, to get the city running, to run public services, to run institutions. So in the end, what you're saying is that you're just postponing the inevitable cycle of an unending corruption. So in the end, both of them are about renewal. One of them is a renewal that is nostalgic, and the other one is a renewal about moving forward into the next cycle. But both of them end up delivering exactly the same result. Like for me, this is the sense of impotence that I get out of these movies that really drives me insane. They propose nothing new. Like it's almost sad to observe that one is the cycle going backwards and the other one is the cycle going forward. It's a cycle. It's the same cycle.
So I hear where you're coming from. I mean, definitely if you're, I mean, I feel like maybe you're being a little bit sacred about, what someone says about left. I mean, it's definitely a more left oriented perspective than perhaps like the Nolan franchise that I talked about.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a purist left. But
No.
I guess, well, I mean, this kind of goes back to the exact same question that we landed on, which I think is always the question we're going to be landing on when we talk about The Matrix 4. Which, by the way, after more reflecting, I've come to the conclusion that the movie truly is revolutionary, but only in that it's bad in ways that I could have never really conceived of until I saw that movie. But anyway, like, I mean, I know you're not a screenwriter, but like I guess like if you can for just a couple minutes, like we can brainstorm, like what would that look like? Kind of like, how would Batman kind of create meaning in Gotham, or really, break out of this cycle that seems to, whether you go left or go right, pretty much brings us to the same place. I mean, and in a way, I think that, when like you end up with something like, sometimes when you try to like answer that question, you end up with something like The Matrix Resurrections, where you end up getting something that's just like, all right, well, it's all just nonsense. We're kind of reestablishing some kind of transcendental signifier because otherwise we're just going to get caught up in a similar cycle if we try to like, really find an answer in any terrestrial means.
Right. So for me, there's very few movies that actually break the cycle or actually have something new to propose. But it's interesting because they propose it almost in a very subtle way, like Star Trek, for example. Star Trek, it can be perceived as a very apolitical movie in the sense that that the topic of discussions or the center motifs of the movie are elsewhere, but politically and economically. But the background in which these conflicts take place, they reveal a different political organization. You see, like, for example, governments are not centralized. You have this anarcho-syndicalist approach, or even, for example, Dune. Like the way in which political structures and economic forces move in these movies are very much different. And I feel like Batman, Joker, Matrix, they are stuck in a cycle, and it's not even a self-aware cycle. It's strange because it's a cycle that feels it's subverting itself by repeating itself. It's almost like they find this joyance of falling into the same mistakes again and again. Doesn't it feel naive to say that we need to rebuild trust in institutions?
Well, it definitely feels like a cop-out, but then again, at least I give the movie a pass because at the end of the day, I feel fortunate that in a Batman movie, we're even getting like some kind of like attempt or gesture towards political philosophy, because at the end of the day, it's trying to be any kind of a manifesto or something like that. But does it feel naive? Yeah, it depends. But again, I don't really know what to expect. That wouldn't, if it was anything more. Again, I just don't know what the alternative is.
Right. So for example, Jared, like for me, the comment that really, like, I understand that from the very beginning, they make you think about this dichotomy between the two political offers, the renewal project and the other one. I don't remember the slogan from the girl. But it's very super progressive.
Okay.
It's a girl. It's a young girl. She's black. Like everything like screams progressiveness, like all over. And I don't even remember the slogan. But the other one is renewal. So renewal is a purely conservative promise. The other one is very much progressive, right? But it's progressive in the sense that, and this is where I think that the key issue is. Liberalism is less and less leftist as it progresses towards the sense of a pure aesthetic of progressism. Like they paint politics with green, with rainbows, with colors, with consciousness, but they only paint the same system with different colors. It doesn't fundamentally changes anything. So what is the true concern here? That under the material conditions of late capitalism, it doesn't matter what color you paint the institutions. Institutions are still susceptible to the corruption of money. Like this for me is the true impasse of the movie itself, and this is revealed in the sentence said by the lady politician when she meets Bruce Wayne in the church, and she tells him, "Your father used to be a very active philanthropist. I want you to get back on that." You know, like what she's saying is, she's saying immediately the same thing. Like, I'm promising you the same type of institution dependent on private money, on the relationship between private and institution. I'm just painting it with a different color. That's it.
Right. I mean, ultimately, yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. The liberal element of it is that just like if people weren't, in a sense, I suppose that ultimately it is making the same argument that Nolan's movies are making, in that basically if these individual politicians were less seduced by money, then the institutions would work, and then the renewal project would ultimately have like created a better society. So again, we'll go back to this thing that it's actually the individual choice that's leading to the corruption.
Exactly. You hit the nail. Exactly. That's exactly the argument. I was not able to articulate the final argument, but you did a perfect conclusion. That's it. It still relies on the individual ability to change the system. When the system itself leads to this cycle of corruptions, when the right amount of money arrives.
Yeah. And then what did you think about, well, first of all, I'm curious about what one of these movies that you said actually does provide an alternative. Do you have one in mind?
Well, Star Trek is probably my favorite one.
Oh, so is a particular movie like Star Trek the one with the J.J. Abrams one, or the show as a whole?
No, the show as a whole. Actually, this was mentioned by Noam Chomsky, quite a couple of years ago. But Noam Chomsky mentioned that one of the very few movies that actually proposed something that could be feasible and is not very far-fetched from what we're saying. And it's weird when we mean this by talking about Star Trek, but the anarcho-syndicalist, it could be something interesting because it's about modes of organization. I think what is finally in the end completely broken about most of the systems we have today is the representative part of democracy. You know, like we used to run away from this idea of direct democracy because it was too complicated and too bureaucratic. And it's true there are some examples in the past about direct democracy being already a nightmare, a bureaucratic nightmare. Can you imagine if we had to vote about everything that is done about the institutions? Because in the end, the issue
I feel like it's a Black Mirror episode just waiting to happen. Can you imagine if there was an app and like, it's just like you got a ding. It's like, all right,
oh my God,
Twitter's mad about something. We got to vote on whether this person lives or dies.
Well, exactly. But then again, as we progress with technologies like blockchain, like these things become slightly more viable. And I'm going to give you a couple of very, very pragmatic examples, okay? But how we can move into the direction of more direct democracies. Like, for example, when you select a politician, let's say the politician is attached to a policy. So let's say if Bernie wins, the day he wins, we get universal healthcare. The day he wins, because his policy is directly related to his selection as a representative. So it's no longer about promises and promises and promises and speeches and intentions that then when you reach the floor and you get impasses and you get filibuster and then nothing happens because of referentiality, like the representative aspect of social democracies that become a bureaucratic nightmare that is designed not to change anything. And then it's ridiculous that people expect to change the world by voting. This is insane. This is completely insane. Is not even naive. It's insanity. To say that we're going to change the world by voting, for me, it goes beyond naivety. It really reaches the point of madness, because we know how institutions work. They are designed in a way to create the deadlocks that will impossibilitate the changes that are going to be truly transformational. So let's say one step into the direction of a more direct democracy. We just say that if you vote for a politician, he's not even obligated. It's an automatic measure. You vote for a politician that is attached to a policy. So let's say, for example, if you want to vote Republican, maybe the Republican you're voting for is giving permissions for 15-year-olds to buy guns at Walmart. Perfect. So the day he wins, somebody from 15-year-old can go into a Walmart and buy a shotgun. Great. But if you vote for another representative, the day you vote, abortion becomes legal in every state that he represents, or if it's a federal level, at the federal level. Then it becomes a little bit more direct. Then we don't get stuck into these cycles of representativeness.
But what's the purpose of the representative at all then? Like, why not just cut the middleman and actually just vote directly on the issue?
Not to go to the bureaucratic hell. That's why we have to, in a way, the way is the notion of revolution versus reformism is like, how much can we reform the system versus how much is easier just to destroy everything and start anew. We cannot destroy everything and start anew because we don't have a plan. We don't have a system that can substitute the existing one, even if the existing one is full of flaws, right? So we're trapped in reformism. But then again, what we have to think about reformism is like, what type of level is already pre-incorporated in reformism in order not to change it, but to keep it the same and just in a way make us able to tolerate the same type of repetition and cycles over and over. So if the conditions for revolutions are not right, what we have to fight for is how are we able to create the conditions for the revolution to eventually happen. So the conditions today don't exist. So what will make us come closer to the conditions for a potential revolution to take place?
Okay, so did you think that the Riddler was the protagonist of the movie?
I think, to be honest, one is one of the few casting choices that I actually enjoyed. I think the casting is well done. I really love his voice. He's like, exaggerated acting.
I guess what I mean by that. Sorry, let me just take this back for a second, just to bring it back to Batman. Like, if we were to say, like, at least, like, if this movie is not actually proposing like a real solution from whatever, like, an authentic leftist perspective. Ultimately, my argument is that, like, it is at least contrary to Nolan's thing, or in conversation with Nolan's attempt. It is kind of like more towards a collectivist approach rather than an individualist approach. But as we kind of discussed, ultimately, it's really just another individualist. It's just individualism again. I guess my question is, what do you, and I think that we're going to probably continue to see, albeit slow, Hollywood continue to move in this direction, where instead of, like, we have like very liberal movies, like, for example, Black Panther, where ultimately like, we just reinstate the status quo, except at the end, T'Challa, just kind of makes like a gesture. He does like basically charity in Oakland or something like that. So, and then now, if you're at least going to, I still think that, like, it may be baby progress more towards the left, but I do think that it's a step, that this movie is a step, because at least it acknowledges that, that there is limits to looking through society as just a collection of individuals, and that, like, that systemic issues do ultimately affect individual choices and stuff like that. And I'm curious, again, if we kind of put our thinking cap on, like, what do you think is, once people get tired of this, and once people kind of start to see the impotence of this, what's the next thing? Like, what do you think the next Batman is going to be doing? If this Batman's arc is ultimately that, like, I can't as an individual punch people in the face enough to make society healed.
Yeah.
And then he realizes, oh no, it's going to have to be kind of systemic change. But then ultimately the systemic change isn't going to happen unless he, punches the individuals in the face who are corrupt, who would otherwise be corrupt. What's the next Batman going to do?
Yeah. What is interesting here, and I really love the question. What is interesting here is that you're thinking about the Batman as a cause for something, as a cause for change. He's the trigger for change. Where I think of Batman as a symptom of problems. Batman is not the beginning of the solution. He's the repercussion.
I think that in order for me to agree with what you said, that would have to be just kind of a statement about cinema in general. Just because cinema, at least this genre of cinema, has to have a superhero that's, basically reacting towards a conflict. And so long as it's about Batman, it's going to be a conflict that takes place in Gotham, which is a corrupt city. So, but anyway, keep going.
And what is this genre of cinema a consequence of, Jared?
What is it a consequence of? I mean,
capitalism.
I mean,
remember.
All right, can we just break that down for a second? In that you're saying that basically, because
Well,
I mean you're just talking about movies are expensive. They need to
No.
like make a lot of money, therefore they have to be like these big spectacle event films.
But not only. Yes, but not only. Like, for example, we have to go to this Chomsky again a notion of manufacturing consent, in the sense that you can also go to Adorno and Horkheimer from the Critical School of Frankfurt, where they say that entertainment, it's about perpetuating the ideological presuppositions that sustain the system itself. So it's not the fact that entertainment is artistic in the Puritan philosophical sense of the world, that art, it's a critique that tends to subvert the existing order and reveal the existing contradictions and paradoxes of our way of living. Because movies are not art, not these at least. This is entertainment. This is a product. So what products do, even unconsciously, and I'm not talking about the conscious choices of producers, screenwriters, and directors. Products themselves, they can only promote the values that perpetuate the system in which they can proliferate, right?
Right, so, but even the product is going to have to adapt. Is kind of what I'm talking about.
Absolutely,
like in order, yeah,
absolutely, but never really subvert. They will adapt in the sense that you can see in the end is interesting, because you said, so the issue was more about leftists being about collectivism and right being about individualism. But then in the end, we revealed that even the left was about individualism again. And even asking the question about the role of Batman in changing this perspective is an individualistic question. So you see, like individualism is still the dominating ideology that is self-perpetuating through the very existence of a character like Batman to begin with.
So ultimately, we're not going to see something go beyond this. We're probably just going to see another like reversion to like a Nolan and more like another like just slight variation on an individualist thing, and then it's going to swing in the other way to another slight variation on a collectivist take on Batman.
Exactly, and they will say like now it's individualism, but it's conscious individualism where we're conscious about each other, but it's still individualism. A true leftist Batman will say, you know what? I'm going to subvert the idea of private property. So no longer I come from a billionaire family. I can no longer, develop all these tools, technologies, and have so much free time to jump in balconies in the middle of the night, beating people to a pulp. And actually, in the way that private property is being distributed now, and the access to the means of production are being truly democratized, and now everybody has to work for a living instead of using inherited money to develop technology to pursue the psychological frustrations, then the order of society will change. Then things will actually come to a point of change. That change will be not only necessary, will be inevitable, because the material conditions that create human relationships will no longer allow for these individualistic decisions to be made. Philanthropy, it's a consequence of late-stage capitalism. Philanthropy doesn't exist in a society where private ownership of means of productions are no longer an issue. Philanthropy, it's a problem of excess of capital accumulation in few hands. Like, it makes no sense for one individual to make a decision or to allocate capital in the name of others. Like, what about democracy? Like, aren't we supposed to vote for those things? Like, how come Bruce Wayne and his dad came to that amount of money to say to the point? Can you imagine? Like, even the fact that Batman's dad said, I have this insane amount of money and I'm going to put it into the hands of the state so you guys can decide what to do with it. So it's like...
right, that's like the ultimate individualist,
Yeah, it's like a feudal.
Ultimately, it is about those great individuals.
Yeah, it's feudal grandiosity disguised as democracy. It's ridiculous. That's why for me the movie felt really impotent, in the sense that everything that they were trying to do is like they were trying to listening to this constant speech that I agree with you that is not going anywhere, about the fact that we live in an era of absolute inequality and conditions are getting worse. It is harder and harder for young people to buy a house and to actually build a family and aspire to progressing in life. It's becoming harder and harder because the accumulation of wealth is becoming so unfair. Why? Because of illegitimate historical accumulation of wealth due to private property and the ownership of means of productions. Until we come to a point where a movie questions private ownership of means of productions, I don't see leftism. I see only progressism. And this is liberal. That's why I really want to make the distinction. I think more and more, especially American movies, which dominate the genre, they disguise liberalism as leftism, and they are fundamentally not the same. There are
not
some
only
overlaps.
movies, but like the whole news
debate.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
all news. There's not really a. I mean, and when I say left, I don't know if I exactly mean the same thing that you do, but I mean, there's really no leftist news outlets, at least
No.
on television, cable, anything that I can think of.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Aren't CNN and Fox owned by the same shareholders?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I'm 99% sure they are. Fox and CNN, they're owned by the same people. Actually, there are two companies, BlackRock and Vanguard, that they are the biggest shareholders on most competing companies in the world. They own PepsiCo and they own Coke. They own Delta and they own American Airlines. They own Ritz and they own Marriott. They own CNN and they own Fox. Like it's insane. Like once you get to the highest level, it's like. What's up?
Okay. No, sorry. We talked about other movies that kind of approach this a little bit. Mateus told me that you were going to watch Network. Did you watch it?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. God damn it. That would have been the perfect puzzle piece here because
let's do one just about that movie because I think that movie deserves a talk by itself, right?
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, but sorry I cut you off.
No. So that was my final point about that's why I think politics in the US and the way we communicate the bipolarity of American politics to the rest of the world, it seems to be about the choice of the vote. Like they seem to over romanticize this notion that you're going to change the system by voting right. You have to vote in the right direction, and that will bring forward change. Really? Like it's Democratic versus Republican vote at the moment in the US really changing something? Because the Republicans, they defend private property interest in one way, and the Democrats defend private property interest in a different way. They both defend the private property under this notion of late capitalist liberty. There's not really a choice. There's no choice there.
Yeah, I mean, because as you said, ultimately it's a product, and the product it will never be able to escape its primary function of preserving the status quo that led to its existence.
Exactly. Maybe we'll see a Batman in the future that he will start the movie by retiring and just saying that like all the inheritance that I have makes no sense. I don't deserve it. I didn't work for it. I have no merit in this. It belongs to my father, so it makes no sense. Tax me 100% on my fortune. That'd be great.
Well, I mean, but that's like another thing about the sequel that I guess the thing that's disappointing is even if you and I were to come to an agreement that the movie is an interesting development in like the kind of political aspirations of a Batman film, still in the next movie, like all of Bruce Wayne's political lessons are going to be nerfed. Because if he really did learn the lessons that we're meant to believe he learns in the movies, then yeah, he would stop punching people in the face. And if there's no punching people in the face, then there's no movie.
There's no Batman.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Batman has always been this very nasty and obscure figure that in a way represents a morality that is passé. I really think that this is slowly running out of steam, according to me. That's why I feel the movie is trapped so much into the aesthetics of nostalgia. I think if you truly try to portray a realistic Batman, in a way they try to make it very realistic. He fails jumps, he's not perfect, right. He's like falling all over the place, his technology is not always 100% flawless. Like they're trying to be realistic, but they're trying to be realistic in the 60s, not in 2022. Like for example, can you imagine producing the Batman suit in 2022? You have to contact a company in order to produce those materials. You cannot do it in your garage. Like melting.
Which is ultimately the thing. I'm sorry, the ultimate irony of the fact that the Riddler is like this super enigmatic, all-knowing forensic accountant who couldn't figure out who Batman is.
Exactly. It's like that's why there's if you are really rigorous about the movie itself, it becomes completely absurd. Like it has to.
But that's most movies, right?
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
most movies,
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why like I draw the line at like if the movie casts a spell on me and if I'm hooked and if it encourages me to suspend my critical thinking, then it works.
It works.
I just draw the line there.
But that's why for me it didn't, because I felt in the movies so many times during the movie. Like and
it's that thin line. It really is just ultimately about the subjective experience of in the theater. Like if there was a guy next to me talking, I might have been like you. And I might have
lost
just
the
not been
fantasy.
caught up. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, so for me, like the things that broke the mold was that scene with the penguin. For me, if you can watch it again, because I want you to really watch the expression of the characters, and it really made me completely want. I almost stood up and left. It was that bad for me. That bad. That scene for me is really like the lowest point in the movie, probably. Then the second thing, well, the Batmobile itself, it feels more like a vehicle from Fast and the Furious than it feels from a vehicle from the Batman. Like it was really like they went for like a third aesthetic line where you had like the traditional Batmans were like super stylized, phallic, like Art Deco type of Batmobile. Then you have the Tumbler, which is military,
Tank,
industrial
yeah.
comp, exactly like a tank. The unlegitimate child between a Lamborghini and a tank, which makes sense for the Tumbler. But then you have this one, and this one is like Batman within the Mad Max universe or within the Fast and the Furious universe, But then again, I really have to.
I thought it was it's like a muscle car in the like a Steve McQueen in Bullet or something like
exactly.
that. And that's kind of how I saw it.
But I start to think, like, for example, can you imagine being
that's
the
where I
Batman?
see the nostalgia. Yeah, I totally agree with you in that way.
And then how would you manufacture these things? Like, because you have to pay for them. Like, you have to pay for a 3D printer, for a welder, for somebody that bends metal in a certain way. You have to buy all these pieces. And then like all these relationships, they leave traces. Like, we live in 2021. This is insane.
I mean, I guess that's one thing about Nolan's movies is that they did address that that, ultimately it was like they had a experimental, and there was the accountant that figured it out, Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but then again, I mean, there is no Batman in real life. Ultimately, Batman is quote unquote the most realistic superhero, and there's a reason why they don't give him magical powers, or at least they try to prevent giving him magical powers to kind of that's part of the fantasy, right? That in a sense, the magical power is the fact that he doesn't have magical powers. That's the fantasy that's sustained of Batman. And so it's never going to make complete sense because it can't, because there is no real Batman and there couldn't be a real Batman.
So why do they try to approach realism with Batman?
Well, I mean, cynically, I think it's just Matt Reeves. That's just his thing. He likes dark. He likes gritty. He needs to differentiate himself from the previous one because it hasn't been that long since Nolan's thing or even Ben Affleck in Batman. And then ultimately, I think that in Matt Reeves' mind, he thinks that, emphasizing collectivism versus individualism is an extension of realism.
Yeah, it's a reflection of current affairs, no, like current priorities. But you see the persistence of the real world in these fantastic decision makings, like contrast, harmony, timing, like comparison, like the fact that other movies exist. Like in this sense, is not about the symbol that is referentiated directly inside the movie. It's the fact that you have to think about the movie and you cannot forget the other ones. Like this one has to exist, even if it's by contrast within the universe of the others. That's why I struggle to. It's almost like
I was gonna say, what did you think of the new Spider-Man movie? In that, at least, like it kind of, I think that movie kind of embraced and addressed what you're talking about without, I don't want to say without entirely, but while exercising restraint in being just like overly referential about all of the other Spider-Man iterations and all of the various fan service things they could have pointed at.
Yeah, it's like a sense of for me, Spider-Man at least doesn't try to dissimulate what it is. Like it's more like the Spider-Man movie for me fully embraces what it is. It's a piece of product of late capitalism. That's it, nothing else. It doesn't pretend to be grandiose or to teach moral lessons or to provide political guidance and then end up being completely castrated by the fact that it has nothing to offer, like Batman. Because for me, that's the issue. For me, the Batman took on a journey.
And that's the most liberal thing about it.
Exactly. It's like pretending to have a political thing to say where you have nothing to offer. Like I'd much rather see something like Spider-Man, where it doesn't pretend to teach me anything. Like it doesn't pretend to teach me about morality. It's just about pure entertainment. It's what it is. It's product. Like when products become too ideologically charged to the point where they become like preachy, it bothers me. It really gets on my nerves. I think that's why I despise the movie so much, because it pretends to teach you something and then it has nothing to teach. That's why I think I have this lack of empathy towards the movie. I was not able to accept it. I enjoy the Spider-Man much more than I enjoy Batman, and I think that the Spider-Man is childish, is naive to the point of pure entertainment, which is exactly why you go to the movies in the end. Like I don't go to the movies to expect to get out the next political ideology idea. I expect to get out of that of a book, or a lecture, or something serious, or a real thinker, not out of the Batman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it is interesting because I think that The Dark Knight really did leave an impression of, that Batman was the site for, real critical thought and intellectual discourse that can be applied to a superhero movie. And I think that, yeah, this one was a little bit more politically oriented. And I think that I think that for a lot of people that are probably caught up in this liberal cycle, that probably, watch CNN and like think that, like Anderson Cooper really is going to make a difference. Yeah. I think that it probably resonates for them. But I mean, ultimately, I still think that the movie's not, I don't enjoy the movie because of the politics. I enjoy the movie because ultimately I think it's well crafted. I think the fact that it's a movie about a guy who dresses up like a bat and a guy who's called the Penguin, and it's like as serious as it is and as brooding as it is, and mostly worked for me, is ultimately why I enjoyed it. The fact that they have political things to say, you're definitely right in everything that you're saying. I guess I'm less critical of the movie's shortcomings in having a political lesson, because I think that that's just kind of like extra for anyone who wants to watch. And I think it's also probably like, it's ultimately there for the director who thinks that, and it convinces him that he's creating art.
So two closing statements, if you will. Like the first one is that for me, it's really a misery for these, how do you say, naive liberals to come out of this movie thinking, like voting is how we're going to fix things. Like voting right is what is going to get us to a better place. This is for me what is like, it makes me rumble my stomach. It really makes me feel super bad. And if people got out of the movie thinking that, like, oh my God, you're the problem. Like you're the problem. Like thinking that, voting is going to change the world. Oh, please, like just read a little bit of history and you're going to be disappointed with yourself. The second comment is that I really like your comparison between Batman and Zodiac. And actually, Zodiac is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Zodiac. That movie is, it's close to perfection when it comes, especially when it comes to mystery, right? And I agree with you with a lot of the similarities between Zodiac, Batman, and even Seven, when they are very much into their own genre. But just talking about Zodiac and Batman, like Zodiac is a movie that will be solved with a cell phone. Like if a cell phone existed in Zodiac, the movie will end in the first 15 minutes of the movie. But it's the fact that when you see that the impediment of communication leads to all these interpretations and lack of immediacy and the lateness of the response of some of the police and the miscommunication and lack of organization between corresponding institutions in different states and everything. But when you try to apply this premise to Batman, then it becomes like, oh, really? Like Batman? Like you have access to retinal cameras and you have problems finding a guy? Is like that for me, like, oh, really, dude? It's like, why don't they make a Batman noir and just make it in the 70s? Like, if you really want to go to that detective Batman, contextualize it into something that makes sense with the type of problem that you're trying to present. And at the moment, murder mysteries are like hitting home runs every day in Netflix. They're hitting home runs every day. People love to go back to this nostalgic idea of detectives and the problem of communication and having the information disposable, but just a small mismatch where you cannot communicate the right clue to solve the crime. But in 2021, where we have the NSA and privacy no longer exists, It's like if somebody wanted to catch a guy like Riddler, he will disappear. He will not even be in the news. Like,
Right. And that's why I think that ultimately, like, if film or even television is going to continue to be a viable medium that really captures captures people's attention and entertains people,
mhm.
it's all about um, whether or not the tone works, whether or not it really does capture, because it is going to reach this place where most conflicts can be just
Yeah,
immediately solved with a proper use of technology or proper appeal to the right omnipotent authorities, which is why I think that ultimately, like, a lot of what you're saying just to me just boils down to, like, did the movie cast a spell enough on me for me to spend thinking about that?
true. Yeah, true, true, true. And,
Yeah.
and I just want to make the final. What do you thought about Alfred?
He wasn't in the movie very much. I think that I mean, he was all right. I mean, my favorite Alfred is still like the Michael Keaton
Oh
Alfred,
yeah.
who's like, like this like fragile old man who can, like, all he can really do is just make soup for Bruce Wayne.
I know, I know, I know, and I will never forget Pattinson for insulting Alfred. I mean that relationship between Alfred and Batman is such a complicated and rich relationship that it makes no sense for Batman to behave like that. Like I cannot imagine a spoiled brat because it's in the movie. It's supposed to be like Pattinson has been the Batman for 2 years or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make any sense for Batman to come to that point in age and still be a douchebag to Alfred. Like I will never forget that. Like that piece for me was like, oh my god, really, dude? Why? Like the guy is taking care of you. He's like he's being your service guy for like an eternity. He saw you grow up and you're being a douchebag. It's like, oh my god, how old are you? 15? I can't stand it.
I mean, yeah, he's like basically he's 15 in his soul, in his
Yeah,
angst. He's
yeah,
got that Kurt Cobain angst.
yeah. The makeup and the emo look. Yeah, it's true. And
Yeah.
I love Catwoman, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think she's definitely my second favorite Catwoman after Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle
Yeah.
Pfeiffer is like literally like one of
Ooh.
the first like sexual feelings as a child I remember having was definitely towards Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman.
That's
And
cool.
Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman was just like,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
you can't really have it these days, which I think is unfortunate. But like Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, like one of her weapons was seduction. I
Yeah.
mean,
Femme fatale, no?
yeah, she kicked
Yeah.
ass, but there was a scene where like she stopped Batman from whooping his ass because she was just so hot and was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, please, you're not going to see." Basically, this Catwoman as well as Anne Hathaway are basically just like men who kick ass, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I
But
think
anyway,
sexualization was a little bit higher with this one, but I really
yeah.
liked the acting and her story arc was really good. Like for me, it was one of the highlights of the movie.
Yeah, I like the performances overall. I mean, I think that John Turturro, I was a little bit worried when he was going to come on the screen because I'm like, I'm going to be thinking about the Jesus. I'm going to be thinking about the Jesus.
Yeah,
But no, I thought it worked.
yeah, it
And
worked.
yeah, and so when I saw the trailers, I thought this movie could be a catastrophe. I really thought it was possible,
Oh, you
and
see?
I think most of it like came together pretty well.
Yeah. So you see, this is another thing about the notion of anticipation versus reality. When normally when you expect something to be a total disaster, then you go in and you're like, not as bad. Then you end up like feeling it was better than you actually expected. For me, it was probably the other way around. Like I really felt like the direction it was going. I had something else in mind. Like I felt they were gonna do something more like in the line of the last Joker, and I was excited about it. But then when I saw it, it was like, oh no, they tried to make a detective movie in 2021.
You should do a series just like Diego ruins movies. I mean, like you could do Cinema Sins except much smarter.
Sorry, guys.
Any movie that even approaches a political statement, Diego will just destroy it.
So, I'm so sorry. I'm just a party
No, it's
pooper.
all good.
Yeah,
It's all good, dude.
let people enjoy the little things. Don't be. I don't
Yeah.
want to be that guy.
No, it's all good. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, guys.
My pleasure,
For
man.
those of you who are here from my channel, definitely check out Diego's content, especially if you speak Spanish, because I listen to watch Diego's channels, and I'm getting better at my Spanish. I studied it in high school, but I'm going to try to get Diego to
Cool,
create
man.
some more English content soon. Check me out on Twitch. There's going to be a link in the description. I'm playing Elden Ring with
Oof.
Diego's brother, and then me and his brother are going to bully Diego into buying a PS5, and then he'll join us too.
I'll join the tarnish party. That will be a pleasure. Jared, thank you
Yeah.
so much for the invitation. And if you guys are watching this from my channel or from one of my points of view, you definitely need to go and see Jared, what he's doing. He's building a great community, starting something super cool by his own. His Twitch streams are very interesting and very entertaining. I watched them yesterday doing some runs. It was really cool. And again, man, it's always a pleasure. Let's do the next one about the movie that I'm pending to watch, which is
Network.
Yeah. I own you that one.
All right, man. Let me know. All right, man. Really appreciate it.
Always.
Have a great rest of your day, man. Take it easy.
You too. Take care, dude.
All right, man. Peace.
See you guys.